like to thank everyone for attending today's panel discussion on lessons in resilience. This is kind of the culmination of a long process that involved a lot of folks. So I want to thank all of those who are attending this presentation. I want to also thank all those who were participants in the original survey, which Dawn is going to talk about a little bit more in a second. And then, of course, I'd like to thank all the panelists who are going to be part of the presentation today. We're very excited for our second one of these panel discussions. We looked at the guest list earlier. Great group of folks. Looks like there was some 501c3s, some C6s, some private foundations in the mix. So we are super excited to begin. So I will cut my usual introduction to a little short since we're behind, and kick it over to Dawn Labrie, who's going to go over some housekeeping notes and how this webinar really came into play.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jack. And we're so thrilled to have all of you here. Welcome back to those who joined us for that first session. If you joined us, you know you got a lot of good information out of that one. So we're excited about this one. And if you did miss that last session, go to our website because we do have a recording of that first session that's linked there. Go to www.laporte.com. And check it out because there was so much good information there. To those of you who are just joining us and missed that first session, I do want to give you a brief background of how we got to today and presenting here. So back in the fall, we did send out a survey to our nonprofit clients asking them to share with us their experience since the pandemic. And the responses that we received were so varied, but really chock full of such good information that we felt that we could really expand this and have 2 sessions of panelists. So we had 4 of those panelists on in our first session. And today we have 4 panelists that are going to share their stories. So as I mentioned before, we had so many wonderful stories that we hope to continue to share this information through different mediums such as blogs and articles and things of that nature. So please stay tuned. We do anticipate having more good information coming out of this. I do want to go over a few housekeeping items. First, all attendees are muted and your video is turned off. We have disabled that chat feature, so that's not operable. If you do have questions, though, there is a Q&A portal that is at the bottom of your screen. So please do go ahead and submit questions, and we will handle those at the end of our session. If you do have a question that's specific to one of the panelists, go ahead and put their names into your question so that we direct it to the proper person. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters for today. Today we have with us Deborah Lane, who is the Executive Director of Clear Creek Education Foundation. We have Hermione Malone, Executive Director of Good Work Network. We have Wendy Baron, President of Methodist Health System Foundation. And we have Kelly Chavez-Green, who is Director and Nonprofit Leadership and Effectiveness for the Greater New Orleans Foundation. And we are so happy to have you all. So now I'm going to turn it over to Deborah Lane, who's going to get us started sharing her experience.
Good morning. And Dawn and Jack, thank you for having me this morning. We have a lot to share, and our story is interesting, I think, and we're still in the middle of that story. So I thought I'd just begin by telling everyone about the Clear Creek Education Foundation. What we are is a 501c3 that solely supports Clear Creek Independent School District. We collaborate very closely with them to provide innovative learning materials to our kids beyond the terrific education that our school district provides. So we have given over $4 million in innovative materials to the school district for our students and teachers since our inception in 1992. We're a very strong and healthy foundation with a very healthy and active foundation board of directors. We have 29 leaders that serve on our board, and that's what makes us tick, and that is the backbone of everything that we accomplish here in Clear Creek ISD. So I thought I'd just start with how this all began back in January 2020. In some ways, that was a long time ago. In other ways, it was just yesterday, right? So we had our annual partner luncheon, and our slogan for that luncheon, which we all kind of chuckle at now, was embracing 2020 with clear vision. We hosted 250 people from our community. Our students and our teachers came in. They showed off all the wonderful, innovative learning tools that we provided. And it was a great event. We rolled out of there feeling energized and excited to begin a new year. Well, mid-March comes, and as everyone knows, so did COVID, and actually put us into a shutdown. The school district and our organization basically went into shutdown, working from home until August of last year. But all through that time, we kept moving. We just decided we were not going to stop. And with my 29 board of directors, everybody was on board to just keep pivoting, was the key word, planning and moving forward. So we were just about to launch in March our spring fashion show. It's an annual event where our students model. It's a fun event, and we raise a lot of money typically with that event. However, we couldn't host an event with people, so we immediately had to postpone. But we already had our auction items lined up, wonderful silent auction baskets from our teachers, and our sponsors were engaged. Everybody was ready to go. We were thinking, what do we do with this? So our board of directors immediately started in on our committee work to plan out a new idea of what we could do to move forward. The first thing we looked at was, though, what was the pulse of our community? We knew at the time people were at home, they were feeling uncertain, they were skittish. Nobody really knew what to expect, and nobody knew when we could all come out again, although we thought it was soon. So we kept on planning and moving things forward. We thought about how do we ask people for donations during a time when it just didn't seem compassionate, it didn't seem like the appropriate thing to do. So we also had to think about how do we keep fundraising, but also understanding where everybody was. We started some research on an online bidding platform to figure out, okay, can we do a virtual auction? You know, the technology had been out there, we just had never used it. We started having daily meetings with our staff here. Our chairman of the board was visiting with us by Zoom almost on a daily basis, and the board kept on meeting by Zoom to keep our planning and keep moving our events forward. We attended many webinars, and that was such a blessing during that time to get ideas, to find out where everybody was, to share information, which is what we're still doing here today, right? Late March came on, and we took our first step to keep moving forward. And what we looked at was, how do we help our community? We started to realize it wasn't just about what we do here as an organization, but how do we stay engaged, and how do we keep thinking about the needs of our community? And of course, you all know our restaurants were suffering, and we have an event in the fall called Dine Out to Donate with about 60 restaurants in our community, where we promote them, and our community goes out and actually eats at those restaurants and dines there. But we knew that event was probably in question, but it gave us an idea to stay engaged, and we rolled out Blackout Bingo. By doing Blackout Bingo, our community could go and purchase food from our premier restaurants that have always supported education. And we had about 60 restaurants on board. And every week then we could talk about Blackout Bingo. We could encourage our community to go out and go out and have dinner, bring it home and support our local restaurants. So that was a way we could keep our newsletters going out, something we could talk about and keep moving forward with people just staying engaged. And that was the key thing. How do we keep our partners engaged? Of course, the spring rolled on. We had teacher appreciation. We had VIP graduations. And then June came, and we were ready to roll out our first ever silent virtual auction with those wonderful baskets we had from the spring. So we found an online bidding platform, and Bidding for Good was the one that we went with. It was very low cost, and we didn't have any production expenses because we had to cancel the fashion show. So our costs were minimal, and lo and behold, our silent auction raised 40% more than we'd ever raised at a silent auction at this event. And the event, which did go virtual, no fashion show, just a virtual auction, actually raised 4% more than the previous year. So we're excited. We thought, okay, it works. This is another tool in our tool chest that we can use going forward. Summertime came, and of course, we were ready to hopefully do our Topgolf tournament. and with our alumni and friends. And that event actually got delayed 4 times until we actually hosted it in November because Topgolf was closed. I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. But our directors, the 29 leaders that sit on our board, continue to provide information to us on how the businesses felt about charitable contributions. The chairman of the board made calls, the staff made calls to our major partners to just say, how are you doing? Just talk to them. Figure out what was going on in their world. We weren't asking for money. We just decided to stay engaged. But we got a good idea. Come July, a local leader came to us and we were working on a new campaign called Give a Grant. And we were actually going to roll out this campaign to raise money for our teacher grants, which is our major mission. We were getting ready for back to school and we thought, what's a good motto, slogan to get us going? And the leader who came forward, who also put up some funding to help us with this particular campaign, we decided to call it Supporting Teachers, Our Children's First Responders. We raised $70,000 on that campaign versus previous year, we only raised $30,000. So Give a Grant was a big hit, but mostly because we were staying engaged with our partners, with our community. We said, just give $100 to our Give a Grant campaign to help us fund our grants in the fall. And it was actually working. So August was back to school. We thought we were going to do our annual gala in November. We were still planning. We were holding our breath and we were still moving forward. We started calling our major restaurants because it was that time of year to start rolling out Dine Out to Donate. And because we'd run the Blackout Bingo, supporting our restaurants earlier in the year, Dine Out to Donate was still something our restaurants wanted to support and do. And it helped us to drive business their way once again. Dine Out to Donate was a big success in October. And then came a surprise. One of our directors on the board decided he wanted to donate his 50th anniversary Corvette. We decided to raffle it. Our goal was to raise $50,000. We sold 500 tickets at $100 each in about 6 weeks. And then we had to figure out, what do we do with the gala? Couldn't have all those people coming to a gala event. At the same time, our beloved Dr. Smith, superintendent of Clear Creek ISD, was retiring, and he's such a supporter of the foundation and all that we do. He actually agreed to let us roast and toast him. So we had an event that was very VIP exclusive because, of course, we had to limit the number of people that could come to the event. And we actually ran with that event. We actually taped it, then we rolled it out so the whole community could see it, and we went live to draw the winner of the Corvette raffle. Turned out to be another big success. It was an 18% increase for the overall event in fundraising versus 2019. And we were excited about being able to honor our superintendent. We had a raffle for our Corvette, and it all turned out to be a really good thing and another success story for us. In the meantime, we also had another surprise come through. And it just goes to show you, as long as you're staying engaged, things come your way. Our staff campaign for back to school that we roll out in August actually was a huge success and came in at 13% higher over the previous year. All in all, our directors stepped up. We sold raffle tickets, we made calls, we promoted events, and we continued to find sponsors and attend planned meetings to keep moving forward on a daily basis. Our community stepped up too, and that was the real blessing. We learned so many lessons on how to merge technology with in-person events on a smaller scale, and we're going to continue to use that going forward. This year, we're soaring into 2021. We're still staying engaged. We're moving one step at a time to keep moving forward. We just had to cancel our partner luncheon that I told you how we started last year. Couldn't bring all those people together. And we also had to cancel our cook-off event. But all in all, we have a new plan. We're rolling out a Give a Grant rally at the end of March. It's going to be a telethon, a call campaign. It's all going to be virtual, and we set a very lofty goal to raise $100,000. We're going to keep moving forward. We have a lot of support here to do it, and thank you again for having me. I've really enjoyed sharing with you today.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Now we're going to hear from Hermione with Good Work Network.
Good morning. Thank you so much to the LaPorte team for the invitation to join you today. I am Hermione Malone, Executive Director of Good Work Network. We are a nonprofit based in New Orleans whose mission centers around helping women and minority-owned businesses grow. And we actually had an interesting start to our preparation for the COVID pandemic last year, and it started in 2019. Interestingly, our desire to serve more clients outside of the limitations of our physical office is what really laid the foundation for our success last year. So in 2019, we really tried to make an effort to meet our small business owners where they were, and that involved using some technology that we hadn't previously engaged with, including a platform like Zoom, to create on-demand webinars and learning opportunities. And then beyond that, we really examined the tools that we use for one-on-one coaching. Our work is a combination of one-on-one coaching with small business owners, group education, and episodic training like webinars and workshops. And so the tool that we were using was very manual. It required folks coming into the office, and it wasn't very easy to systematically provide the same level of experience or resource to our clients. And so we switched to a much more robust cloud-based tool. And the beauty of that is that the client didn't actually have to physically be in our office. There wasn't paper being shuffled back and forth. And as a result, we could serve them wherever they happened to be. Enter 2020 with these tools in place. I had been following the news both locally and nationally. And once Gavin Newsom in California shut down the state, it became really clear to me that this was going to be much bigger of an impact than we had planned for. So as a team, we started to think about what did it look like to support our clients virtually, because I felt like that was surely coming. And so the result of that was actually impeccable timing. We were really well coordinated to serve our clients virtually. In fact, we had created a stop date where we were going to switch from working in the office to working remote. We had done analysis of what staff needed to do this well from home. We had done a lot of things coincidentally, like we had switched to QuickBooks Online, we had shifted our files into the Google Cloud. So a lot of things had happened that which were going to make this pretty seamless. And so we actually had a day in March where we had people come and clean the carpets. And I said, well, we'll just leave at noon when they clean the carpets, and that'll be the last day that we work in the office for now. And literally later that afternoon around 3 o'clock, Mayor Cantrell announced the shutdown. So we went into that very seamlessly without a lot of chaos. And we started to focus on what our clients needed the most. We had programming scheduled, but it didn't seem to make sense at that point to proceed with what we originally thought would be useful for small businesses in light of this unprecedented crisis. And so we really shifted to what are we hearing from people? There was a period of panic for so many of our clients where we couldn't even get them on the phone because they were just trying to figure out, what am I doing with my business? The other thing that happened is pretty quickly, everyone in our ecosystem of small business support started throwing, their full weight at trying to help small businesses. So we took a little bit of a pause out of a scramble to figure out what are our strengths. So if you work in the small business space, there was a period of time between March and April where you couldn't throw a rock and not hit somebody's webinar about the PPP loan, right? There was a lot of information coming from the SBA and their partners. And so we decided, let's let others do that work. Let's focus on what we do best. And so what we started to do was translate that information. So initially, an added value that we provided our clients is, hey, look, we know you're busy. We know you're trying to scramble to figure out your business, and you don't have time to pay attention to all these press conferences and announcements from the federal government. So we did really short videos where we took all that information and we kind of translated it down into something people could understand and take action on. And so that was kind of our initial contribution to trying to help people wade through so much uncertainty. The second thing we did is we said, let's get back to our core, which is helping businesses grow, right? So we went back to some of our partners and said, look, here are the things we know people are dealing with. Help us create programming that responds to that problem right now. And I will say this, the beauty of the shutdown that kind of happened across the country is that so many talented people who would have had conferences that they were speaking at were suddenly grounded. It just happened so fast that people hadn't yet evolved to like everything is virtual. And so we were able to get some really amazing friends of ours and experts across the country to do programming for our entrepreneurs, and they did it at a very low cost. Some of them were like, just take it. They agreed to let us record it so that we could make it available to clients beyond that one day. The spirit of support that we had among so many of our partners and colleagues was tremendous. And so we leveraged those videos into an online learning library, which became another resource that we were able to provide to our clients. Again, that gets back to something we were trying to do in 2019 that was a little bit slow going because people were so like skeptical of the virtual concepts working. And so all of the work that we did always was able to be leveraged into additional opportunities. So we didn't let the trainings go to waste. We put that into a YouTube channel. That YouTube channel ultimately became an online community for us. We switched to another platform. And so we now have this on-demand online learning library for our community of entrepreneurs on that platform. And all of the work that we were doing during last year to meet the ever-changing needs of our clients and to respond quickly to a very dynamic environment for their business operations, all of that actually was building expertise for us in the delivery of virtual business services. So much so that at the end of the year, we received a federal grant from the Economic Development Agency to provide virtual business services to entrepreneurs across the state. And so we are in the stakeholder cultivation and investigation portion of that grant right now. But all of that learning about what worked and what didn't and how important it is to work within your ecosystem and kind of stay in your lane, be adaptable and nimble, but also rely on your strengths really is helping us in that federal grant. The end result for us is that we were able to drastically expand the number of small business owners that we're able to touch. So in non-COVID times, if we would have had a training in our conference room, we could perhaps have 30 at the most folks in that room. We were able to have webinars and workshops where there were 70 plus entrepreneurs involved in those trainings. And so our impact in terms of the reach of our education, our staff expertise to small business owners was 200% when we compared spring of 2020 to 2019. So our reach expanded exponentially, and not even just to entrepreneurs in Louisiana, but we had folks in other states who were reaching out to us for help, assistance with PPP loans, training related to marketing and HR. And so it was really an excellent way for us to further our mission by reaching more small business owners. And in addition, I think the response we saw from the corporate community and the philanthropic community resulted in a 67% increase in the funds that we were able to raise last year to support the small business sector, which was so decimated over 2019. I think so all in all for us, preparation, being nimble and responsive, not wasting any learning or opportunity, funneling that into the next resource or support we could provide our clients was really powerful for us and also effective. Thank you.
And now we're going to hear from Wendy Barron with Methodist Health System Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. Our story actually starts in early 2018 when I took over as president and CEO of Methodist Health System Foundation. We are a health legacy foundation that was primarily funded with the sale of Methodist Hospital, but we're also a hybrid because at that time the hospital had a school-based health center and the new owners were not going to continue that service, and we felt it was important for the community, so we took it with us. So we do grants. We have grant funding for health-related programs, and we also do operations. We run 3 school-based health centers in St. Bernard Parish. So we're a little different for your normal foundation. We had been using an IT vendor since our days at the hospital, and that was, you know, I guess we started as a foundation in the end of 2004. My predecessor was basically our in-house IT expert. As technology is not my strongest skill, I knew that we really needed a lot of reliability from our outside partner. So my CFO and I met with our vendor to learn more about our system, the current system, how it operated, and put together kind of a tech wish list of what we thought we needed. A month later, we hadn't received anything back from them. Just as a side note, I had watched, because I had been a consultant with the foundation since its inception, for the past 2+ years, add off-site backup as an organizational goal that hadn't been fulfilled. So I kind of wondered how in the world could it take that long to add off-site backup when that to me seemed like, if you know technology, should be a pretty easy project. So with no progress, we decided that we really needed to solicit proposals from other vendors. We signed with Bellwether in March of 2018, and obviously off-site backup was at the top of the list. It turns out during that initial analysis of all of our systems and the millions of cords that were running through this big computer room that we have, and they found out that our on-site backup was not working. And who knows how long that had even been off. So our immediately on-site backup became our, first and primary need. So with the Bellwether team, we got a new NAS server upgrade for that on-site backup. We did a spam filter to protect emails. We did an upgrade to our accounting software that was outdated. Our email server was hanging on by a thread, and we had added Office 365 to upgrade that. We upgraded our Time Clock Plus system. We had an out-of-date and not supported system. Our firewall suffered a lightning strike, so we needed to have that reinstalled. Our PC and server antivirus software was old, out of date, not supported. We did cybersecurity training. We upgraded the Wi-Fi coverage in our buildings. And then finally, we were able to get to offsite backup. So all of that had to be done before we could even think about getting to offsite backup. We had to add new hardware. We had to align file access. We had to clean up a large number of duplicate files. Our system was just a disastrous mess. We had to get the file rights for our servers. And then we migrated over to a data center and a disaster recovery program that would allow us to be able to operate really at any time from anywhere. And once all of that was done, we were able to decommission our local servers. And that basically happened within the first year of working with our new vendor. The Bellwether support, it's basically like having an IT office that they are outside of your office, but they're available all of the time. There's a help desk that any of my staff can call when they're having any issues. And our old system used to be you had to call the president of the company, who would decide if he thought he could figure out something, a fix for whatever your problem was. And then he would contact the vendor to maybe be able to help. And, it was very slow and laborious. So now the staff can get immediate access to help, and things just move really quickly. They also do an annual strategic overview, which allows us to really look at everything that we have, anything that could be problematic or become problematic, any kind of upgrades that are needed. As I mentioned, it was mind-boggling to realize that almost every single software system we were using was not supported, and regular upgrades hadn't been done to it. So That was, kind of where we found ourselves and all that work we had to do in that first year. And really, to put the icing on the cake, our first year payments to Bellwether were less than we were paying our previous vendor. So just put that into perspective. Then fast forward to March of 2020 and the pandemic. The ability to move to virtual and work from home was fairly easy because our systems were ready. If we had been in early 2018 when the pandemic hit, we would have been capsized. I mean, there's just absolutely no way that any of that would have been able to be done when you were, and then try to get into a virtual platform. Now, I'll say fairly easy because our organization may have moved mountains in the IT department, but we're a pretty paper-centric workplace. I think, as Hermione mentioned, they had a lot of things that were done with paper. My people like their paper. They like to have it in their file cabinet. And so they like to touch things and move them around that way. So it was really more difficult for our staff to adapt to virtual than it was for the systems to be ready online and ready to go. So our biggest transition at the time of the pandemic on the IT side was to add telehealth to our school-based health center sites. As I mentioned, we operate 3 school-based health centers in St. Bernard Parish. And with schools closed, we could have done as others did across Louisiana, we could have closed with our school. But our clinical and school-based health center team was not to be thwarted. We have 4 nurse practitioners, 2 registered nurses, 2 medical assistants, 4 social workers, 2 clinic coordinators, and a medical director. They all believed that healthcare workers needed to be part of the solution in this environment. We quickly added telehealth to our electronic health record system. We use Advanced MD. They were offering a free 90-day trial, and we got on it really immediately in March. We realized, though, that it wasn't user-friendly, and it was going to eventually become expensive, but the cost wouldn't have been a problem if we could make it work really well for us. When we couldn't, we decided to test out some other systems. We tried Doxy.me, we tried MS Teams, and even a couple of others to see if we could make something work. Now, you have to remember, we're a school-based health center, so a lot of our parents consent for care for their students. And so getting consent is really important. We really realized that the biggest roadblock to the virtual platform and telehealth was getting consent in an easy way. A lot of these systems used an email process, and if less people, unless you're really working at an office, are using email as their main line of communication. There's so many more phone-supported systems that are much easier for people to use. We finally turned to Zoom for healthcare, and it's been great. So we are now operating fully telehealth on Zoom for healthcare. So because our technology platform had that huge upgrade and we were ready, all we had to do was really add a few cameras to our PCs, to those monitors, because they all did not have cameras, and we were really ready to roll. Bellwether was right there with us, and the partnership allowed us to expand healthcare services to meet the needs of the community, which have been nonstop when it comes to healthcare. We're doing COVID testing, we're doing vaccines. As a matter of fact, we just got a call from the state, and they're asking us to add more vaccines to our delivery for the next few weeks to be able to do not only all of the teachers in St. Bernard Parish, but all of the preschool teachers and daycare staff. So anyway, that's kind of blowing and going. Our school partners have been really thankful that we've been able to be there. St. Bernard has had students in school all year long. Their elementary and middle school students have been all students, and their high school's been a hybrid schedule because just the number of students. There are over 2,000 students at Chalmette High School. It's the only high school in the parish, and they just can't physically have everybody on campus at the same time. They were hopeful that numbers would be a little bit better and they could have everybody back in this spring semester, but when the numbers went up after Thanksgiving and Christmas, they stuck with the hybrid schedule up to this point. On an interesting side note, with, all of these systems in place and moving to this virtual environment, we were able to work through all of the hurricane threats we had this year. So it was very interesting. Previously, we'd have closed offices and nothing would have happened. And the fact that everybody has the ability to work from home or from afar, that with the exception of the one that did strike and we had some power outages at certain people's houses, everybody was really able to work through all of the hurricane threats. So that ended up being sort of an added benefit. So really proud of our team, thankful to our technology partners, and really, I think the key was being ready, and thank goodness we were, because as everybody's mentioned, I mean, nobody even imagined what this was going to all have in store for us when, you first heard of COVID in March of, 2020. So thanks you all.
Thank you, Wendy. We're now going to hear from Kelly Chavez-Green with Greater New Orleans Foundation.
Hi, good morning, everybody. And yes, thank you to the LaPorte team for inviting me to be part of this great panel. LaPorte is such a great partner of ours at the Greater New Orleans Foundation, where I work as Director of Nonprofit Leadership and Effectiveness. And for those of you that might not be from our area, the Greater New Orleans Foundation is a community foundation that serves Southeast Louisiana. And so we work with donors. We are also a grant maker. And in the work that I lead, we are dedicated to supporting the leadership of our nonprofits, both at the staff and board level, and helping to build their capacity for greater impact. And these have been great stories. And I thought it would be good to sort of maybe take a look back at the impact of COVID-19 on our nonprofit sector. And I will say too, this work began in 2019 before the pandemic, and we had partnered with the University of New Orleans to conduct a comprehensive survey of the nonprofit sector in Southeast Louisiana. You guys are in the nonprofit sector in some capacity. You know there's just not a lot of data on our sector, and we needed this data to understand how we might be more supportive of the sector, both as grant makers and capacity builders, but also to help nonprofits understand where they were, benchmark against their colleagues, and so forth. So we had been working on this comprehensive study and actually launched it in March 2020. And a few days later, it was March 13th, when the governor announced the school closures. Our survey was out just a few days, and we realized that the way the survey was designed was no longer relevant given the pandemic, that everything had changed. So we were able to quickly pivot, shorten the survey, and focus the survey on the impact of COVID-19 on our nonprofits. And of course, this was early on in the pandemic. So if we go to the next slide, I always, again, feel it's a mystery. The nonprofit sector is a mystery to most folks. And so again, the survey was the opportunity for us to really understand our sector in Southeast Louisiana. And you can see on the map, it represents 13 parishes that are the part of the Greater New Orleans Foundation service area. And I think it's pretty impressive to see just what an economic impact the nonprofit sector is on our communities, both in their assets and in their revenues. But here in the New Orleans Metairie area, it's over 11% of the workforce is in nonprofits. And actually through our survey, we saw that wages are actually higher for similar positions in the nonprofit sector when you compare them against the private sector. So the nonprofit sector is really important to our communities. It has an economic benefit to our communities and to our state. And sometimes I just don't feel we recognize that. And particularly it was important to lift that up during the pandemic. So if we take a little look at the data on the next slide, and I'm sharing some data really focused on what we learned about the impact on services and on finances. And I would be happy to share the full study with anybody that's interested. But as you've heard in the stories today, our nonprofit sector is resilient and it is agile and it can adapt. And even though we learned in our survey that 73% of nonprofits reported shifting their work remotely in the first few weeks of the pandemic, even during that time, they were still providing direct services in response to the pandemic. So even in all this chaos, 43% of nonprofits were providing direct services in the early days of the pandemic. For most nonprofits, this included resources and referrals, remote services like some of the ones we heard about today, information. Hermione talked about that, like translating information and making sure people had the information they needed to take advantage of the opportunities that were coming down for both businesses and individuals, and being the advocates. There's always some questions whether or not nonprofits could advocate, and they certainly can. And our nonprofits continue to advocate for investment in communities as we're seeing federal resources coming down to the state level. And then of course, providing essential services in person, particularly around food security. We saw a lot of innovation happening in that space, and even some nonprofits pivoting and using their assets and their resources to meet immediate community needs. I think of like the NOLA Tree Project, a nonprofit in the New Orleans area that has volunteers to do green space development. They have this cadre of volunteers. They quickly pivoted to use those volunteers for food delivery. So again, just representing the resilience of our nonprofits. But of course, as a result of the pandemic, nonprofits had to cancel, suspend, many of them delay their programs as they figured out how to shift services online. And again, this was happening as there was a huge increase in demand for services. So just having to balance this shift and this pivot, while frankly, nonprofits also reported having to cut staff hours, maybe furlough staff. Many executives talked about not taking a paycheck for a few months or reducing their own salary so that they can meet this demand for services and shift during these very uncertain times. We also heard that 23% of nonprofits were interested in collaboration, even a merger or some sort of strategic partnership that would really help them mitigate some of the impacts that they were having on their operations or finances. And some folks that are not familiar with the nonprofit sector might say, well, 23% is not that much. Really, for our sector, that represents a real willingness to work better together, which I think we have the opportunity to leverage. And so if we look at the impact on finances, which is on the next slide, and again, some of our fellow panelists shared some of this, we knew in the months, weeks following the pandemic that cash flow was going to be a crisis for our nonprofit sector. Many times, for various reasons, nonprofits do struggle with cash, and frankly, I think that's where our nonprofits are most vulnerable. And what contributed to this certainly was the cancellation or the postponement of events or fundraisers. When we looked at the data, about 34% of nonprofits' income was represented in these canceled events or fundraisers. You know, Deborah talked about, there was anticipation, well, we can move it to the fall or even the spring 2021. And I think nonprofits are realizing that if they haven't already, it's really time to pivot these events and reimagine them in a new way. But also nonprofits reported a pinch from delayed funding and reimbursements from government. That's a challenge for nonprofits. Generally, reimbursements from state, local government tend to be slow, but in the midst of the pandemic and chaos, that was an extra burden put on already cash-strapped nonprofits. And again, that's a place that we can come together and advocate for quicker payments on these reimbursements. I don't think a lot of folks understand that nonprofits really raise a lot of money from earned revenue. And in our surveys, you can see on the slide, almost 50% reported a loss of earned revenue. And certainly this, like arts organizations would come to mind as they're reliant on ticket sales and had to close down many of those events, but also many nonprofits hold contracts. For example, youth development organizations have contracts with schools, and with the schools closures, those contracts, became null and void. And again, yet another revenue stream for these nonprofits was delayed or eliminated for many of them. And this was all coming at a time, again, where not only were our nonprofits suffering, but so were individuals. So again, folks struggled with how do they make those kinds of solicitations and fundraise during a pandemic. And that is something that we provided some webinars and some learning opportunities at our foundation to help nonprofits navigate that. We were surprised to learn that only 33% of our nonprofit respondents had a reserve fund, which creates more vulnerability. When we looked at the data, those that did have a reserve fund were better equipped to shift, manage cash flow challenges, fill their gaps, retain staff. Again, the PPP loan certainly help with staff retention. And again, that's an area where the foundation is focusing, is how might we support organizations build up these kind of safety nets like a reserve fund. So all of this data has influenced the way we work and the recommendations that we have made to nonprofits, philanthropy, other grant makers, of how we can support nonprofits through this crisis. So if we go to the final or the second to final slide before I close out, we did definitely have some recommendations for nonprofits as a result of this study. Some of them you heard about from the other panelists, but really we feel this is an opportunity to reassess everything. And to not really think about long range planning. I'm getting a lot of calls from nonprofits that want to do planning, and we think planning is great, but it is still so uncertain out there. And so we're recommending short-term planning, develop scenarios, be ready to pivot, and do seek out opportunities to restructure, to create some strategic partnerships. We're hearing from nonprofits interested in joint programming. How could they take their best assets, what they're the best at, like Hermione talked about, and partner up with another organization to maybe create a continuum of services or consolidated back office? How might organizations share an IT support person or share back office for finances? So we do think there's lots of opportunity there through some strategic partnerships, but also focused decision-making on mission, sustainability, and impact. That's where our energy needs to be focused. And again, although it might be aspirational for now, we do think you should plan to build a reserve fund or grow your reserve fund. I mean, you don't necessarily have to build it yet, but just having a goal can really set a course to build this important tool. And of course, don't lose sight of opening responsibly. Again, we're still in this uncertain time. Many organizations haven't reopened. There will be extra costs to your organization when you reopen. So be sure that you're building that into your budget. Be transparent and over communicate to your staff. I loved hearing Deborah about board engagement. Unfortunately, some of our nonprofits have left their boards to the side because they're prioritizing other issues, but this is a great way to energize your board and really leverage the gifts that they bring to the organization. And yes, please invest in self-care for yourself and your team. Our frontline workers are burning out. They need support. They need tools for their own mental health. It's hard for a nonprofit to do good if your team's not good. And I'll finally close with sharing that we are just closed our 2021 State of the Nonprofit survey. If we go to the next slide, this is a follow-up survey, just closed it. We have a 37% response rate. It's a much more comprehensive survey. And this survey will allow us to measure what extent have our region's nonprofits exhibit resilience. So we're going to take a look back and compare data. Where are our nonprofits now? And we're also collecting demographic data on our sector. Who's leading our nonprofits, and how do financial and service resilience outcomes differ by the race and gender of nonprofit leadership and target populations? And again, I will say we use this data to inform our work, and we hope that other nonprofits, but grant makers and philanthropists also use this data to inform their work. So we hope to publish this study at the end of March. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And thank you all the panelists for your sharings. I do want to put a reminder here that if you do have any questions, I did see a couple in the queue. So if you have any questions, please remember to put them in the Q&A portal, and we'll get to those at the end. But now I would like to take this time to allow each of our panelists 1 or 2 minutes to offer their top tip that came out of their experience. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Deborah.
Thank you, Dawn. I would have to say it's engagement. Starting with your community, being engaged, making sure that they know what you're doing, understanding that those relationships that you've built are still there, and just keeping that connection. And also that engagement with your board, to make sure they're on board with what you're trying to do. Moving forward, everybody's moving together. So it truly is a task that we all move forward on, and we take it one step at a time. And that's how we're going to get through this. And one day, very soon, this will all hopefully come back to some normalcy where we can all meet in person and enjoy each other the way we used to. So keep using your virtual tools to take care of those relationships in the meantime, but also call them, talk to them. People want to reach out, and they want that human connection.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Hermione?
So I think my greatest tip and learning comes from an entrepreneur who talked about how in the beginning there was all this emphasis on pivoting, right? You know, how do you take what you might be good at and use that in a different way to keep your business afloat? But as the circumstances on the ground kept changing, the pivoting kept happening, and the entrepreneur referred to it as pirouetting. She's like, I'm no longer pivoting, I'm just pirouetting. And so for me, the takeaway is to get really adept at change. Like, things will not be constant. And if you wait until you have perfect information, you're just going to be waiting in a time when, you know, we all need to really be taking action. So I'm embracing the pirouette, and that is my tip for you as well.
Awesome. Pivot was the word, wasn't it? Wendy.
Well, I guess, you know, technology is so vital in this new world. So you really need to stay ahead, make sure you have the right partners, you know, trust your vendor resources, go to them and really be confident to ask for what you need. And as I mentioned earlier, IT is not that expensive. To me, it's scary because it's not my forte, but as I mentioned, we were paying for services that left us unsupported and in a really difficult situation, and we paid less for services that catapulted us into the 21st century and ready for the pandemic.
Thanks so much. And Kelly, can you finish us out here with a tip?
Yeah, I guess I would say just don't go back. I think we've all learned so much through this experience. We've really built capacity. We've built our toolbox. And, you know, in our own programming, as we shifted, we have created more accessibility. More folks than ever are able to attend our programming. We've also figured out we can monetize this, and that there's folks outside of our region interested in our programming. And again, I don't think we'll ever go back the way we were. And it's an opportunity again to reimagine our work. And I'm hearing nonprofits talk about, do we need an office space? Do we really need brick and mortar to do our work? Or can we have cost savings and put that into impact and services? So again, I believe that we will move forward in a hybrid model, and those that choose to embrace this learning and this new way of doing business are going to be more sustainable and more impactful because they didn't look back.
Thank you so much. I am going to go ahead and turn this over to Jack to go to our Q&A session.
All right, thank you, Dawn. We had a lot of questions come in both here and through email prior. So most of them are in two general categories. So this one is kind of for everyone to address in their own way. But the first one is, now that you have the benefit of hindsight and you can look back and kind of come up with this perfect scenario, what would you do differently throughout this whole process? So I don't know if anyone wants to go first. Kelly, you look like you had something to say.
You know, this is in jest a little bit, but I was like, I would have invested more in my office home because I need a good chair. Like, we're not back yet. You know, it's been over a year that we haven't been in our office. But you know, I would say, you know, for me, it you know, maybe more attention to the inside of the organization. We were very externally focused, get programs out there. You know, of course, we care deeply about our nonprofit partners and grantees, but, you know, we work more hours than ever, lots of screen time. And really what we're hearing now is our people are tired and overwhelmed. They need a break. Folks weren't taking vacation time. Like, look what's happening at your staff. Are they taking their vacation time? Are they managing screen time? And I think wherever your work is, just the self-care of our staff, I think, is really important, and sometimes comes second or even third, which is not in our nature, right, as nonprofit leaders, but somehow that happens.
I'll add to that, Jack. I would say for us, the technology's been out there, and for whatever reason, we were just comfortable just doing things the way we were doing. So we have learned a lot about technology, and we're also seeing how going forward, it is going to be a world where you combine in-person and technology. So I wish we had started digging into all the benefits of technology sooner, so that when this happened, we were already working on the technology side as well. So it is a learning curve, and we have learned a lot, but it is our future. And it's something that we could have been doing before this all hit, and we just weren't. It was easier just to do things the way we were doing them.
And I'll just add, also, Kelly, I will say I brought my chair home for that very reason. And I let my staff take the chair. I was like, if you want to take the chair, you can. But I would say I would actually try to intersperse a little more non-technology engagement, I guess. I just feel like there was a point in the summer where people were getting Zoomed out. And we had a program with a 4-month cohort, and they were graduating, and this was the first time that the cohort had been completely virtual, and the graduation was going to be virtual, and I felt bad. And so I drove across 3 parishes with certificates and little cakes for the graduates, and it was so amazing to just like catch them for 5 minutes, socially distance, say hello, give them a treat. And I just think back to, I think, how great that was for them as well, because their whole experience had been virtual. So in hindsight, I think if there was a way I could have interspersed more non-technological engagement with both my team and our clients, that would have been great. I'm not sure what that could have looked like, but I think it's definitely worth continuing to think about.
And I'll just chime in. I think, you know, what Kelly said about taking care of your team is just vitally important. You know, we've got people on the front line. We're actually, you know, healthcare workers. So that's been, you know, a really busy time, and there's been lots going on and lots of stress there. So I think really thinking about that and making sure that there is some time to turn off. As you know, I think that when you're working from home, or you're able to work all of the time, sometimes you do work all of the time, and that's really, you know, can be tough on your team as well. So watching out for that, I think, even going forward, because I think we're going to be in a different place, and you're going to have the ability to do that. And how do we make that manageable so that we're not, you know, totally burned out? While we know there've been some emergencies and you have to deal with those, every minute can't be a crisis or emergency.
Yeah, those are great answers. Wendy, this next question is addressed to you. You had touched on it a little bit in your final comment on embracing the change with technology and working with vendors. And so the question is, would you be willing to share the approximate cost to IT setup? And then as well as, are there additional monthly costs? I think one of the big concerns is, like you had mentioned, at what point do we sink in resources in these tough times? So if there was any of that you'd be willing to share, that'd be appreciated.
Absolutely. So our first year, we were under $50,000. We were paying probably like $4,000 a month for all of the services. Now, we did have some money, and I don't know those exact numbers, on some capital projects, because as I told you, we had, lots of outdated pieces of equipment. But the all of the work that was done was under $50,000. We're a little bit over that now in our future years, probably under 60,000, probably under 5,000 a month, just because we've added people and we've added additional resources as we've been able to continue to move forward. So as I said, we were paying our other vendor more than that for absolutely nothing. And when I tell you, I have this handy dandy, I'm not being paid by Bellwether, let me tell you, but if anybody wants an intro to Bellwether, we have these handy dandy phone numbers, and they answer phone calls all the time and get you immediately fixed with whatever's happening in your system. And when I tell you how much that has meant to the way we operate, it's just, it's mind blowing. As I said, we had an old system that went through too many people that never got anything done. And now we are all blowing and going at every minute. So if anybody wants to call or have specifics, I can hook you up with my CFO and he can give you some more information, and we're happy to share anything that would help anybody else.
Great. All the other questions were kind of around this other same type of theme, so we'll just condense it to one question here. As a result of the pandemic for y'all, how has y'all's organization changed, and what does it look like going forward, and maybe in ways that you didn't expect before the pandemic?
I'll start. We're operating in a hybrid mode. I'm in my office today, but I'm not in my office every day. We have a nice size office building, so we don't have to have people on top of each other, which allows us to be able to be in the office. But we don't have everybody here on any given day, so that we've got space and we're moving that out. The other piece is it's allowing everybody to keep up their virtual platform and really know how to work that way in the event we need that. So I think that sort of this hybrid work schedule will probably remain and has been kind of an interesting transition for us. As I said, I was used to, people like to be in their seats.
Yeah, I will echo what Wendy said. I think our programming will continue to be a hybrid. We're learning from evaluations. People still value like breaking bread with each other and being in the same room. So I can imagine eventually we will go back into our beautiful building and beautiful training room that we have. But I'll say, the pandemic coupled with the increased focus on racial equity together has created a lot of changes for our organization. I think we are getting clearer on our values. We listen to the data that came from our survey about nonprofits needing more operational support. So we've shifted a lot of our grant making to operational support. We've reduced some of the burden of our reporting and just really honed our systems so that we could create some efficiencies, not only for us, but also for our nonprofit partners that are already very busy. And again, there's been lots of conversation in philanthropy about needing to do this, but I think the pandemic, but again, coupled with the focus on racial equity has really helped us focus a little bit more on our priorities.
And I'll say,
oh, go ahead, Deborah.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll just say that our community is still very split as far as who's comfortable being around people, who wants to do everything virtual with Zoom. And so we're still trying to meet the needs of everyone. I expect that we'll continue to do a lot of hybrid events between using technology, a lot of video work, much more video work than we've ever done, and continuing to tell our story through the virtual world as well as in person, because we do still have a lot of people that want to get together, and we're trying to do that as well. So it's going to continue to be both, offering both scenarios in our community.
And I was going to say that we as well continue to provide services virtually, and with the expansion of the geography that we can serve, that will continue as well. But for us, I think the other additional opportunity is to be more intentional about how we solicit and receive feedback from our clients. When they were just all coming into offices, it was really easy to kind of have these off-the-cuff conversations, or when you had a group together for a training opportunity, that was a really easy way for us to get feedback. And now we are being a lot more thoughtful about how we do that. We also know people are getting a lot of things pushed to them via email. And so this is just causing us to be more intentional about getting that kind of voice of our customer that's going to help us design the programs and resources to be most impactful to them.
Thank you all for weighing in on those questions. Wendy, it looks like there's a few folks that are interested in your contact information. So since you volunteered that, I will make sure those who are asking to get Wendy's contact information to you, so you can ask her a little more about her technology conquest she went through. So thank you, Wendy, for being willing to help some of the folks here. That's all the questions that we had in the Q&A. I wanted to take the time to thank all of our panelists, Hermione, Deborah, Wendy, Kelly, thank you so much for taking time out of y'all's busy day to sit with us. It's a lot of great information y'all went to, and I think it's great that y'all be willing to lend some of your valuable time to us to share your successes, your struggles, your failures, so that we can all kind of feel one as a group and know that we're not alone in trying to get through all this. Thank you all the attendees for taking time out of your day to listen to us, and we appreciate all those who took part in that survey. So thanks again, everyone, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.